It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to It's Just Business. It's the show where we look at all things that have to do with legality and business of sports. I am not Chris Larry, as the intro suggested. Chris I believe he's overseas on a work
Yes, he
thing.
said he was going to Africa.
Yeah, I don't know what he has to do in Africa, but hopefully he makes it alive and without being kidnapped or anything of the sort.
I heard it's something about rains in Africa. I don't know.
Oh my God. See, I'm not even going to say what that reference is. I appreciate it and I got it immediately, but I'm guessing most people will not.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what our demographic on this show is, so maybe they did.
I will just say that Steve Luthiker will be proud. That's all.
I like to throw a good music reference in there for you. You love your music, so
I do, and okay, I'm gonna give it's Toto Africa for those of you who don't know. And,
great song.
Great song. Great, yeah. Steve Luthiker is an unheralded giant of music, in my view.
Right.
The dude is an unbelievable guitarist. Here's a fun. You want to hear a fun Steve Luthiker fact?
Sure.
He was the guy who wrote and played the riff on Michael Jackson's "Beat It."
I did not know that.
He played all the guitars on Thriller, except for the Eddie Van Halen solo in "Beat It." And Luthiker was the guy who told Quincy Jones to go find Eddie Van Halen because Eddie's this genius, which he was. Rest in peace, by the way. He died 2 years ago this week. And so Luthiker wrote all that music.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And recruited Eddie to do the solo.
That's a heck of a supergroup if you really want to break it down that way, then.
Oh, yeah.
If you got Michael Jackson and then two legends, doing the actual music there.
Well, then you throw in Quincy. And
Vincent Price.
He was just that he did the voiceover on the song Thriller. And then Eddie rearranged the song "Beat It." If you listen to his take on what happened, he rolled in there, didn't like the arrangement, rearranged it while Michael was out of the room, and then recorded a solo on it and said, "Hey, I hope you didn't mind. I totally redid your song." So
I wonder if Michael Jackson minded.
Apparently not. They put it out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes. So sorry to sidetrack you there with a one line.
We could do a whole podcast on music.
Yes, you could. I'm terrible about music.
Yeah, yes. I'd have to find someone better than Alex.
Right. Not hard, honestly.
So there's a lot of other things to talk about, fortunately, and this is one of these shows where it's going to come back to Washington, which is sort of the genesis of our site and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because Dan Snyder is just a never-ending font of both negative and entertaining stories. So
sure.
This week's what's happened. There were two things. One, I did not see this, Alex. Maybe you can confirm. Dave Earl, our colleague from the Hogsty, told us that there were some rumors that some big Snyder news is going to drop.
Okay. So that's been making its way through various media channels, some national, like I think Pat Metcalf said he was hearing rumor, or McAfee, that's it. McAfee was saying he was hearing some rumors that Snyder might be forced to sell soon. And then the Sports Junkies locally said something big was on its way. And that was all they said.
Sports Junkies being 106.7 local Washington D.C. area radio station.
I would imagine most people know who the Sports Junkies are who listen to us, right? Like
probably, but there's certainly some that probably don't.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
None of that actually happened. That was apparently some sort of rumor. I didn't personally see it. What actually happened was that Dan Snyder's lawyers sent a letter to the chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, which is Carolyn Maloney. Right. And then one of the attorneys, John Brownlee, did 2 radio interviews.
He's the attorney for the team, too.
He's one of them. Yeah. I'm going to get to that.
Yes.
So, anyway, he did a radio interview with J.P. Finley, which of NBC Washington, which I did not listen to, and then he did another one with Grant and Danny from 106.7, which both Alex and I did watch. Now,
yeah.
So this letter is 9 pages long with another 25 pages of exhibits and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The letter is from Holland and Knight. Holland and Knight is a major national law firm that purports to represent the Washington Commanders franchise. And John Brownlee is one of 3 attorneys who signed this letter, even though it's written in first person from Tom Davis, who is a former congressman. So he's the big name on this.
Which is very odd that it's a former congressman and like these guys, it feels like to me that.
Well, these guys are dedicated white collar crime guys. That's why they're involved.
Okay. That makes sense then.
Yeah. What's weird is it says I, and all 3 of them, signed the letter. That's what's strange. But so I don't know if you read this letter, Alex.
I've only read summaries of it. I didn't read the whole thing. I figured you were going to. So
I read all 34 pages and highlighted and did my thing to this. Mm-hmm. So this isn't really a letter in which they think anything is going to become of it in terms of committee. What this is all about is getting their argument out to the public. Because notice that this letter was leaked in 5 seconds, and it was intended to be leaked. This was never intended to be confidential.
No. This was leaked by the Tom, or not Tom.
Yeah, it's not even really fair to say leaked. It was really released, by the law firm.
People misuse leak a lot now.
Yeah, I just misuse leak. Yeah. So this is their attempt. And matter of fact, the last line of it expressly says this. The last line of the letter says, it's 2 sentences. I harbor no illusions that this committee will change its present course of behavior. My only hope is that the American people, who are the ultimate judges, will see this investigation for what it is, a politically inspired hatchet job, and begin the process of removing this stain, the stain this investigation has placed on the committee I so respect and love. Mm-hmm. So that is the point. So I have obviously a big diatribe about this, but Alex, I don't want to ignore your thoughts. Let's start with your thoughts on this whole thing, and I will go into sort of some exclamation about what it all means.
Okay, so my first thoughts on the letter and this whole offensive. Let's just be clear. This is a PR offensive that they've gotten on. Dan Snyder recently just hired a new PR person for the team and for himself. And clearly this is what they were tasked to do, is they were tasked to go after this thing in all likelihood because something is coming out. Either the committee's report will come out or some of these investigations that the NFL's doing are going to finish up and come out. You pair... have you ever heard of anyone's lawyer doing back-to-back radio interviews with a radio station like that to talk about something like this? That's weird.
Yeah, well, that's clearly planned. It is a PR offensive.
Yeah, and you can even throw in the Dan Snyder photo with Jerry Jones that happened last week and say that's part of a PR offensive. They're clearly trying to say, hey, NFL or other owners who may want me out, this is me. I'm going to fight back, So, I think that's kind of what's going on. It could have been in response even to that story that came out in the Post last week, where several owners said they want Dan gone. It could have been a response to that. There's a couple things that I think are interesting. We both listened to the interview, and in the letter too. I think the team accidentally let something big slip.
What's that?
They've pretty much admitted that they leaked the emails that got John Gruden fired in this.
In a roundabout way.
Yeah. They've pretty much said, we put those emails out there they're saying they put it out there to the committee, but obviously I think it went out a lot further than that. They also went and attacked John and Jay Gruden, at least in that interview. I don't know if you picked up on that. I
did hear it in the interview. It's not in the letter.
No, but clearly, I think they helped John Gruden's case a little bit by mistake here, which is interesting.
The Jay Gruden attack was interesting
the video that the team released when they fired Jay Gruden.
Well, and this is a video of Jay sitting on the sidewalk out front of some bar that looks to be, what's that town down there, Alex?
I honestly am not sure. I couldn't tell if it's in Ashburn or if it's Old Town. It looks like Dumfries, maybe. I don't know. No, they don't really say where it is. Yeah. It's some suburb.
Now he has something in his hand. He's smoking something.
Right.
And the attorney in the Grant Danny interview said it was marijuana. Right. I don't know whether it was or wasn't. That's what he said. Okay, so here's what this letter says. There's really 4 big picture points here.
Sure.
1, they say that the committee ignored evidence of the team's turnaround in the current state of the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
2, they go over the testimony and background of some of the witnesses and say you disregarded a bunch of these things, meaning you did not attack the credibility of these witnesses. And then false accusations against Dan Snyder, mm-hmm. and then the shadow investigation. So we're going to go through all of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a general state, this letter was pretty well done. They have a lot of good points. I didn't agree with all of it, but I do agree with a lot of it. And they've made the point that I've made from the beginning, which is twofold. 1, this isn't a real investigation. This is truly a hit job. I don't like Dan Snyder any more than anybody else, but that's what it is. And it's you don't stick a bunch of congressmen deposing people in a subcommittee office and call that an investigation. And the sort of the broad-based allegation here is they only interviewed a limited number of people. They didn't really subpoena any real documents, and they overlooked a lot. And all of that is 100% true. Now, as to the first point, which is evidence of the team's turnaround current state of its workplace, yeah, they didn't look into that, but it's also kind of not the point.
Right.
Yes, it's apparently it's gotten better. We're not there. It seems to have gotten better, but that's not really the point.
Right. So it's the point is you did something. You were doing the wrong thing for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now that you're doing the right thing for 2 years, great. But now let's talk about why you did the wrong thing for 20 years.
Now, it would have been more fair and complete to go over that for sure. But that's not the present is not an excuse for the past in this case.
Right.
So while he makes a point, I don't think that's the far more interesting part in here is what the section they've called disregarded evidence. Now, they've gone through and criticized Jason Friedman, Melanie Coburn, David Pauken, and Bruce Allen. Right. So Jason Friedman is the guy who was a ticket sales. He had progressed from a account executive, meaning a guy who's selling tickets, to the VP of premium sales.
He was basically second or third most high-ranked guy in that department.
Yes. And his original deposition went over some of the people he worked for and whatnot. That's not the point.
Yeah.
And so Friedman was there to corroborate some of the cheerleaders' allegations of misconduct. A lot of what he said was secondhand. It's like, I heard this, I heard that. He did claim to be there when Snyder allegedly touched and then tried to steer Tiffany Johnson to the limousine. He said he was there.
He was that executive who was there, yeah.
But he couldn't remember where or when or anything, and they make the point of that in the letter. And he was also had a bunch of things to say about tickets. About
he's the one
sales.
who put out what I honestly still think is the biggest part of this story, that supposedly the team was keeping a second set of books to skim money.
Yeah. So yes, all of that was what Friedman said. And so what the attorneys say is the part that the committee ignored was, 1, Friedman, according to the Holland and Knight, was terminated by Jason Wright for abusive treatment of subordinates and had concealed a lengthy sexual relationship with an intern 15 years younger than him, and had saved highly inappropriate photographs on his company email account. And this part I don't remember. I was trying to hunt through the depot right before the show, and I was making Alex wait too much, so we gave up. They say that Friedman admitted to the committee in the course of his testimony that he had previously perjured himself in connection with an unrelated federal court case. Now, I read those depots like months ago. I could have forgotten about it, but what I am sure about is that whatever it was, I thought it was minor because it's not sticking in my head and I don't have a note about it and I didn't write about it in the column.
Right.
So that is one thing and this letter does not expound on it at all. So that tells me that this is a very minor point they're trying to make look into a major point. So
yeah. I mean, I don't even remember him being in another federal investigation or that being mentioned, honestly.
I got up through about half of it before we had to give up to start the show. So sure. I'll find it and I'll update some one way or the other on this. And then it says following his termination, he wrote more than a dozen letters, text messages, emails to Wright and other team executives trying to get his job back. So assuming all that is true, it paints another picture of Friedman's potential motivations behind his testimony. And it would be something that if it was a real investigation or a real court investigating this or a jury hearing it, would definitely be testimony that would bring his credibility into question. And so I think that's fair enough. That all of that is fair enough to raise.
I mean, it's fair to say, yeah. I mean, if he was sour about being fired, I'd get it. It's also fair to say every bridge gets burned with this team. Like and I made this comparison more about Bruce Allen, but I made this comparison talking about this with our friend Disco online. If there's a murder and there's a getaway driver, there's the guy who killed the guy, there's someone else who helped, everyone gets charged with the murder, right? Like, that's the way that works. None of these people are the good people. Bruce Allen's not really a good person. Jason Freeman's probably not a good person. Dan is not a good person. They're all in cahoots together. They're just ratting him out. That's all. Like, I don't care if they're good people. I just need to know what they're saying. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. The credibility part, though, comes in. What they're saying here is that Friedman's making this up because he's bitter. And this is not proof. It's not. It's just attacking his credibility. It's telling the public, hey, there might be a reason why Friedman said all these stuff. And by the way, they denied all. You know, they're denying that Snyder
Friedman's
did anything.
Making it up. Bruce is making it up.
Well, they admitted in the interview and in the letter that the culture was bad. What they're denying is that Snyder had anything to do with it. And as we'll get to later, he's basically blaming it on Bruce Allen, which there's a major flaw in that, but we'll get to that.
Yes. Well, that's the fun part.
We'll get to that.
We'll save that for the end.
Yeah. So that's Friedman. So the next one they've gone through is Melanie Coburn.
Right.
Melanie Coburn was one of the senior people in charge of the cheerleader program. She was one of the ones that made allegations that the cheerleaders were mistreated. The video, that's what Melanie...
The pimping out of, to be clear.
Yes. And I thought their attack against Coburn was very weak. Holland and Knight's attack against Coburn was pretty weak. It didn't have much to it. That's also why it's pretty short. They brought up They published a photo. They put a photo in the letter as an exhibit where she's like groping this soldier overseas in Iraq, and they published this very poorly written letter from the wife of that soldier saying how used a bunch of disparaging terms against the cheerleaders and basically you hoes leave my husband alone kind of thing.
Wait. So their evidence is here's a PR photo that we had staged.
Well, that's. And they're making the Holland and Knight is making the point that she was, if the cheerleaders were overly sexualized, she was a part of it and contributed to it and encouraged it. That's what they're saying.
Okay, that's the pretty weak argument.
Well, it is. That's why I said it's weak.
Yeah.
And publishing the letter from the wife of the soldier, I don't think really did anything for me.
It has no bearing on that argument, honestly. Really look, you're the real lawyer, but. This has no merit, that letter.
Yeah, no, it does not. That's really all they had against Melanie, which ought to tell you something. So David Pauken, next guy. David Pauken was a senior team executive. This is the guy who alleged that Snyder made him pour milk in Ted Lerner's
suite. That guy. Yeah.
That's him. And he's had a bunch of allegations like that. He was basically the Snyder's the sleazeball guy.
He was the guy who also said Snyder asked him to get cash out to pay prostitutes because Dan didn't want it on his credit card.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Grant and Danny asked him about that in the interview, or asked Brownlee about that in the interview, and he just kind of dodged the question, didn't answer it.
Right.
He denied everything generally. So what they're saying about Pauken in the Holland and Knight letter is that he, quote, quit the team in a rage over 15 years ago after Mr. Snyder denied his unprecedented request for an equity or stock option stake in the team as part of his compensation package. Now, that is an outrageous ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Of a closely held professional sports team, that
to even want like 1% would be nuts. Yeah.
Well, and that's just not the way it works in the NFL.
Right.
You know? So that's a really dumb thing to ask, if true. And the other major part of this is he says the letter claims that Pauken, quote, used contractors involved in a multi-million-dollar renovation project at FedEx Field to work on his construction projects at his own home, failed to disclose this arrangement, constituting a material conflict of interest. Now, it says they also used stadium team employees and the team's architect for construction project at his home. So two things can be true at once here.
Mm-hmm.
He could have hired all these people. It might have exactly been on the up and up, and maybe he should have possibly disclosed this relationship pursuant to team policy, but that's not necessarily wrong.
No, I mean, as long as you're not paying them out of the company till.
Right, and that's not, and they don't say that he was in the letter, which tells me that they know he wasn't. They make you think that this is bad, but they don't explain why, and so
they're inferring something, or
I think the real hook is he quit in a rage over 15 years ago after Snyder denied his request. That part sticks with me. The other part does not.
Well, so Steve, here'd be my question.
Okay.
Is that written down in any legal like in their in their evidence? Is that they're like an HR report that states this is what happened?
No.
Then I'm gonna say it's a lie.
They do have what they do have. They've attached construction permits which show that construction occurred at his house.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't deny that happened. That seems to be reasonable. I just think that that's not necessarily.
Steve, you've had work done on your home over the years, right? I mean, like if you find a good contractor, I don't care where you find them, you use them.
And again, I mean, this is not a publicly traded company. It's not the government. It's a closely held private corporation. And yes, certainly if he used contractors on Washington's dime to renovate his house, that's a problem. He could be sued. It could be criminal.
Oh, absolutely.
But none of this is what they said. So the part that sticks with me is this is another guy that's mad at the team. He was fired 15 years ago.
Everyone who leaves the team is mad at the team. That's
yes. The Washington Redskins / Commanders is where football careers go to die.
Yes.
But this is the evidence. This is what the letter's saying to attack the credibility of Pauken. Okay. It says the committee declined this, and this part is true. The committee declined to ask Pauken any questions about his hostility against the team and Mr. Snyder, and refused the opportunity to review evidence of his bias. All of that is 100% true. The committee did not even attempt to attack the credibility of the witnesses. It was not in any way they were not in any way hostile interviews. They were very biased, one-sided, barely even depositions. These were congressmen asking self-serving questions and making grandstanding statements.
That's what Congress does. Yes,
I agree wholeheartedly. This is not. People need to understand.
Right.
The part that I agree with in a macro level with Holland and Knight is this is not a real investigation. It never was.
Here's what I would say to count. This was not in a court. Like this is a congressional committee. It's a different room. Like if this were a court hearing, then maybe the Snyder side would have had a defense or something. Like they would have been able to ask questions themselves. But that's not the way congressional hearings work.
No, generally. And Congress really has no business doing real investigations. They just don't have the capability to do that.
I mean, they do, but not this narrow. Yeah.
No, and again, there's nothing of substance that's going to come out of a congressional hearing ever. What would have to happen is Congress hires investigators to go look at things, and that's not what this committee did.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so the last one is Bruce Allen. Now, Brownlee in the Grant and Taney interview really made it known that the team is trying to blame all of this on Bruce Allen.
Sure.
The flaw in that is a lot of this goes back to before Bruce Allen was with the team.
Right. The Melanie Coburn stuff goes back to the year 2000, I believe.
Yes.
The sexual harassment, the airline one was what, 2006?
Yeah,
the
something one like that. Yes.
And did you love how they said, "Oh, we never settled that. The airline settled that."
Well, no, that's not what. Okay, let me explain something here.
Okay.
So what Brownlee said in the interview was that an insurance company settled that.
Right.
So don't blame us. Insurance company settled it. He's 100%. He said that is correct. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if clearly Washington had some sort of comprehensive insurance policy that covers allegations of misconduct in conjunction with official team business, and it was covered by a policy. Mm-hmm. I have represented lots of insurance companies in my litigation days, and I've settled lots of cases, including some for large amounts of money. The insurance company does have the authority to settle a case over the objections of the insured, and they do it routinely. They did it to me all the time. Mm-hmm. You have the insured business saying, "We didn't do this. We don't want to settle. We're going to trial." And the insurance company says, "So what? No, you aren't. We're settling it." That is something that very easily could have and probably did happen, and they are probably right. And furthermore, I can tell you from personal firsthand experience that the truth of what happened doesn't really matter. For the insurance company, it's an evaluation of risk.
Right.
How much are we going to have to pay now if we settle it versus the risk of paying more later in a trial? And most of the time, the insurance company will settle no matter what. And then you just write the settlement agreement to say that this is not an admission of guilt and it's confidential. Mm-hmm. So that is what happened here. Now, we don't know what happened on the airplane.
No.
We're never going to know what happened on the airplane. But what he said in the Grant and Danny interview, I don't want anybody to think that that's just nonsense and none of that makes sense. That is exactly how insurance settlements work.
Right, but my point is the way he's saying it is making it sound like we did nothing. The way he puts it. Yes.
But that might have been the case, okay? Again, insurance defense is, for the insurance company, is a matter of economic risk. What they're going to say, what an insurance company will look at is we have a petition for $5 million, a claim for $5 million. I'm making numbers up.
Yep.
And they'll ask the attorneys cost through pretrial, cost through trial, cost through appeal.
Sure.
And they will look at it and then they'll say, okay, we need to have an evaluation of the case. The attorneys will send an evaluation of the case. This is a slam dunk case for us. This is a slam dunk case against us. It's somewhere in the middle. Most of these cases are somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. And then the company will make an economic decision and say, we don't want to risk going all the way to trial. We will settle it now to make the case go away because it is less risk for us. Insurance companies are very risk adverse. So they might have looked at this and said, okay, we're going to have a civil suit. We're very, very, very public national news. The risk for damages is very great. Snyder's a billionaire. Mm-hmm. Juries are going to hate him because they are going to hate him. He's not charismatic at all, and he's very unsympathetic. So the risk of an adverse verdict is probably large, and the risk of a very large settlement is high. So therefore, we're going to settle it over your objections, and you're just going to have to like it. All of that could have happened, and it could be totally untrue.
Could have happened,
All of
also,
that did.
all of that could not have happened, and
no, it
Dan
all did. That is what happened. Now we don't. In terms of the insurance company's approach to it, that is what happened.
Sure.
I'm confident saying that. What we don't know is what happened on the airplane. It could have been true. It could have been not true. We don't have any evidence of that at all.
Right, but we also don't have any evidence. Dan could have also just said to the insurance, "I need this settled."
Could have.
Yeah,
Could have
and
done that.
everything
We
that
don't know.
we've been told. Yeah,
we don't know any of that.
Right. There's a lot more we don't know than what we know, of course.
And we're never going to know what happened on that airplane.
Right.
Only Dan and that unnamed woman know.
And anyone else who's. I think there were a couple executives.
Well,
there.
yeah, I think Palkin might have been one that was.
Yeah.
That claimed that.
Yeah.
And if you really want to go into it, I mean, they didn't deny it happened, but what they did say is that the woman looked okay when she came out of the back. The allegation was that Snyder did something to this woman in the back bedroom of this private jet, and the witness said she looked okay when she came out. That's what was said in the transcript.
Yeah, but anyway, we got on a tangent there. That happened before Bruce got there. That happened in, I think, 2006. The cheerleader stuff, the tape that the Post has is from 2008, and we've been told there are more tapes.
Yes.
Again,
and so it's not. It's very deceptive of John Brownlee in this letter and in the interviews to suggest that all this is Bruce Allen's fault, because it goes
not
back
even
long
deceptive.
before Bruce.
That's just a flat out lie.
It's just inaccurate. Yeah, it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
And this is the part about that the Gruden emails were raised.
Right.
What the letter here says is, I was informed that when confronted with these emails at deposition, Mr. Allen's lawyers questioned their authenticity. We're talking about Allen's allegedly racist, misogynistic, homophobic,
right. The letters
crappy,
between
awful
him
emails and a bunch of other people, unknown people. Despite the fact that these emails have been relied upon by the NFL in its investigation of the team, and despite the fact that a frequent participant in these conversations, John Gruden, immediately resigned when even a tiny sample of them was leaked to the media. And basically they're saying Bruce Allen was a huge poop head, and this is all his fault, and all these emails were awful. And all that is probably true, but that has nothing to do with anything that happened before him. And so that's part just doesn't ring true with me.
Here's my other response to that. He still was with Dan for 10 years.
Yes.
Every day. Dan was.
And Grant and Danny made that point in their interview.
Yeah.
And Brownlee's response was, sometimes you have a hole in your judgment, meaning that basically Dan just didn't see it and, never knew. And none of that rings true.
I have a hard time believing that if you're hanging out with a guy all the time and from all accounts, huge alcoholic tendencies there. Like Bruce.
Certainly heavy drinkers.
Yeah. And the old saying, Steve, in vino veritas, there ain't no way Bruce kept his mouth shut the whole time. You know what I mean?
Vino veritas, meaning in wine there's truth?
Yes. That's the old...
I've never heard that before.
You've never heard that?
No.
Oh, that's an old...
I'm translating Latin on the fly.
Yeah. Good job, by the way, if you hadn't heard it.
I had not.
Yeah, it's an old political thing, man. Like the idea that politicians would get other politicians drunk to find out the truth about things. Like Stalin was honestly one of the most famous political people for this, in that he would have all his generals and other leadership around him. He would never drink. He'd let them all get drunk and figure out who's telling him what.
Somebody should have gone to Ted Kennedy and given him a bottle of tequila and asked if he participated in a sandwich.
I'm sure somebody did.
Look that one up. Okay, so anyway, back to the story here. So that was the attack on... It's easy to attack Bruce Allen because nobody likes Bruce Allen.
Mm-hmm.
But their attack is deceptive for the reasons we've stated. So that is that. And again, the point that is sort of true and accurate in this, at the end of this section of the letter, is that he's asking why the committee was willing to ignore the bad things in these witnesses and also not bring forward a lot of witnesses who, in their view, would have testified in favor of the team. And all that is true and accurate and fair. And the committee was biased, and the committee did not do a complete job, and all of that is fair. And I think the public, as much as you hate Dan Snyder, the public should take that into account. So
sure, but I still come back to what's coming down the pipe that they're freaking out about. Because
maybe nothing. Because look, I've written letters like this, not for the NFL. Because everybody knows who listened to us. I did represent. We didn't get involved in this.
No, you didn't. You weren't on a team this bad.
No, but also it wouldn't have been me that did this if it came up. I was really on the contracts and real estate and stuff side. But point is, I've written a lot of letters, generally speaking, like this, and so this is the way that this is the team's attempt to correct the record. I wrote a letter like this month, okay, and I can't go into what.
No. Don't, obviously, you shouldn't. No,
we knew what we were writing was going to make no difference. Okay, we knew that. There was never any thought by anyone in the organization I represented that the letter was going to matter at all. What we were doing was putting our argument in the record.
Right.
That's all this is. They know, and they said in the letter, we know you're not going to care about what we're writing. I read it to you in the beginning.
Yeah.
All it is to correct the record. And that's fair. They're telling their side of it, and that's okay. And again, a lot of this I agree with. So the third part of this, falsity of accusations against Mr. Snyder. So this is the Tiffany Johnson attack. Now, Tiffany Johnson is the woman who claimed in the testimony, and then Friedman corroborated it, that Snyder grabbed her leg at some dinner and then tried to get her into his limousine. And then supposedly his unnamed lawyer said, hey, no, Dan, you can't do that. That's a really dumb thing to do. They make the point here to say that nobody, including Miss Johnson, could remember the date, could remember the location, could remember the event, or remember any of the people that were there, which is true about what Miss Johnson testified to. So that's their response to it, to say, hey, this is, there's no corroborating evidence. It's sort of like, this is sort of the Brett Kavanaugh allegation argument. You make this allegation, there's no evidence of it anywhere, you can't remember any dates, anything. It's fair. It's a fair thing to point out. And if this was in front of a jury, you would use that to evaluate the credibility of the accusation. But this is just court of public opinion, so
Right.
Okay. And they also make the point to say that what dinner is he at in which some random cheerleader is sitting next to him? What dinner is this? Nobody knows. Nobody could ever identify it. There's no photograph of this event. There are no photographs of Snyder with any cheerleaders, except for at public events. And all that's, listen, I mean, it's not untrue. Now, the weak part of this is this. They published screenshots of Miss Johnson's some social media posts in which she says, I have twice experienced sexual harassment. Both times it was by men I worked with and trusted. They're using that sentence to say it couldn't have been Snyder. She didn't work with Snyder. But listen, one, that's not sworn testimony. It's a social media post. Two, maybe she didn't want to out herself immediately by saying my boss's boss's boss. She's just making a general point that she has been harassed twice. It could have been anybody. I don't think that this really attacks her credibility too much in my eyes.
I would also argue work with and work for is a very minor semantic point.
It is, and she may have been trying to hide who it was and said that. Yes,
because if she had said worked for, I think it narrows the field way too quickly with her.
And perhaps a woman who has been harassed does not want to just out herself.
Also, a woman who's now been harassed by a billionaire.
Yes.
You got to be careful.
Yes. So that's that. So I don't think they did. They do make a good point that she couldn't remember any details, which I find odd. I found odd at the time. I found it odd now. And Friedman kind of said the same thing. He said, yeah, I don't remember where this was or what it was or anything. So take that for what you can believe it, not believe it. That's what the point they're making. They say that none of these people, Brian LaFemina, Bruce Allen, David Pauken, none of them said they ever witnessed Snyder sexually harass or assault anyone, which is true. They didn't. Notice what they don't attack and what Brownlee didn't deny in the Grant Danny interview was the part about the hookers. So,
no. He didn't deny that. They haven't put out any real denial about the whole 2 books thing with that. I mean, I'm sure they deny it, but that's not mentioned in there. Yeah. And we've talked about this before. Obviously, if I feel like Steve, anytime Chris is out and I'm asked to come on the show, somehow something breaks with Dan Snyder. It's
perfect timing. Really.
It's a magic power we have that we don't exploit enough.
Thank you, Holland and Knight.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the last part of this, and I know we're spending a lot more time on this for our first segment than normally, but I thought it was worthwhile, and I don't think you're going to get a deeper dive and more expert dive into this stuff than what we're doing right now. Okay. The last part of this letter, evidence countering the committee's false claim of shadow investigation. Now, this is another thing that's sort of 2 things true at once, and both sides are being deceiving, okay? What they're saying here, what Holland and Knight is saying on behalf of Snyder is that this wasn't a shadow investigation at all. This was, everybody knew what we were doing. That's true. What they were doing was an investigation that had to do with the Meow lawsuit. Now, we've talked about this on the show many times. The Meow lawsuit was this previously unknown tiny little rumor gossip website managed out of India that published rumors that Snyder was involved with Jeffrey Epstein and he was a druggie and all these things. It was all total nonsense. Nobody's made those valid accusations like that against Snyder.
Dan Snyder's not cool enough to be a druggie anyway.
And there's no photograph of him with Epstein. None of that is true.
Right.
So Snyder sued Meow in court in India. And then along with that, in conjunction with that, he filed a bunch of related deposition lawsuits all around the country to get all this information and phone records and testimony, all this stuff. Now, we thought at the time, Chris and I did, that it was very, very broad, and it appeared to us that what they were doing was using it as an excuse to dig up dirt on his partners and a bunch of other people.
Oh, clearly. Well, I mean, because I remember Bruce Allen was being sued in the Meow thing.
Well, he wasn't being sued, but he was.
I'm sorry, deposed. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They filed stuff against some of these cheerleaders at one point. I do remember that too.
Yes. Yeah. When you say file, what he's talking about is there were discovery and deposition requests and subpoenas that were through United States federal courts that were related to the lawsuit in India.
And didn't they go through multiple courts too?
There were a bunch of different courts. Yeah, because these people were in different jurisdictions, and so there were a bunch of different suits.
Right.
And it was, again, they were discovery suits. So that is what Snyder was doing. So it's fair and accurate at the same time to say this wasn't a shadow investigation going behind Wilkinson. It was the Meow lawsuit. That's true. But it's also just as true to say he was investigating the same stuff under a different label. And it's also simultaneously true that the NFL knew about this. He said it in the interview, he says it in the letter. We presented this to the NFL. The NFL knew and approved of our investigation. That is true, but it's also true to say you were in fact investigating the same stuff. Now, the term shadow investigation was thrown out there by the Congressional Committee in the hearing, and that is an attempt by the Congressional Committee to sway the public, and it is a bit deceiving, but it's also sort of semantic word games.
I mean, here's the one thing that's not been brought up, though, that's a big part of that investigation. Having detectives, for lack of a better term, randomly showing up at people's houses to ask them questions, unexpected, uninvited. I mean, and I can't remember which it was one of the cheerleaders said that it happened to her multiple times, and she said goons, really, not detectives.
That was Abigail. Keep going.
I can't remember her.
It was Abigail something was her name. She's in the deposition transcripts.
But there are certain lines that is that a fair investigation tactic, or
Abigail Welsh is the one who testified that happened to her.
Sorry, is that investigation or intimidation at that point? That's where the shadow investigation thing gets hinky, regardless of semantics.
Yeah, it's really the term shadow investigation that's kind of a hanky term,
right?
It's not true of Congress to allege that it was truly just like we're investigating this stuff behind Wilkinson's back, because that isn't what it is. But it is also simultaneously true that they were investigating the same stuff, that they probably did use PIs to intimidate poor, like this Abigail Welsh was like this mom in a neighborhood and had nothing, it was gone and had nothing to do with anything. And to have random PIs show up in suits and dark glasses at your house and start asking questions about you, about the neighbors and stuff, that is very intimidating, probably intentionally so. So so both sides are being truthful here. It's not a shadow investigation. It was above board in that it was in conjunction with the real lawsuit. It's also true that they probably were trying to intimidate witnesses, and it's also true to say that they were their investigation was way broader than just Meow in India.
No, they were clearly using the Meow thing as an excuse to talk to everybody else involved in the complaints against the team.
Yes. So like I said in the beginning, both things are true at once. So that is, I know we spent a lot more time on this than normal, but I thought we had to do it. So that was what happened this week. In terms of what happens in the future, who knows? I mean, there were the rumors that the NFL is getting tired of him. I think, Alex, you make a good point to say that the photo with Jerry Jones might be Snyder's way of saying, hey, look, Dad's still on my side, you know.
Yeah. I mean, look, you and I have talked about this before. There's 3 or 4 owners in the league who have just like trump cards for the most part. Jones is one. I'd still say Kraft is, although he might have had to use his for his own investigation a few years. Like, I don't know how many get out of jail free cards they all get, but I think he used one.
He burned one of them for sure. Yeah. And Alex was talking about the
rub and tug thing. Yes.
Yeah, the rub and tug prostitution thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if there's any others other maybe the Roonies. That's the third.
And the Maras in New York is the other one.
Yeah, but Snyder's in Team Jones, and that will help him.
And Jerry Jones is the most influential owner in the NFL by far. So that is, more I think about it, I think you're 100% right. It didn't occur to me at the time I saw the photo, but I think that is right. It's like, look, Dad is here with me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Steve, you come at things from a legal perspective. I come at things from a political perspective.
See, this is why we do well together. Okay, so we're going to do one more story here. We're going to, in the time we have left, we'll transition away from professional football and into college football.
Okay.
Why are we doing this? Well, because a new college football playoff system was approved. And so right now, currently, there's a 4-team playoff system in which these teams, there's a committee that puts them in, and then there's, a semifinal game and then a final game. Those people who like college football love it. I'm personally not amused by it. What has been approved is a 12-team playoff system in which it's a bit unclear to me who's going to nominate these teams, but somebody's going to nominate all 12 of these teams.
Well, Steve, I can clarify that a little. It's actually the 6 big-time conference winners. So your Pac-10, I don't know what the Pac's number is going to be, because I think they're down to 5 teams. I don't know what.
Yeah, but Pac-10, Big 10, Pac-10, Big 10, Big 12. ACC, SEC.
Their conference winners all get in automatically, and then you have 6 at large, which I'm assuming is going to basically them using the coaches poll, like they always.
Or it could be a committee or something.
Yeah, it could be a committee, but it'll basically be who's number one, who's the top ranked team that didn't get in, and they'll go down the list. That. It still is highly flawed because it means you're going to put fan favorites in every year, and over teams that might be more deserving.
But I have been an advocate on this show for a 16-team playoff, wherein every conference championship, no matter what conference you're in, gets in, and then you have 4 at-large bids. So, in other words, if you win Conference USA, congrats, you're in. Now you're going to have to go play Ohio State in round 1, but you're in and you have your shot. And then you throw in some at-large, at-large teams and everything. That's what I thought. This is better.
This is better because at least you're giving the 6 conferences all a shot. And my one thing is I hate the at-large system. I hate If it were up to me, we'd get rid of the coaches' polls and all this stuff completely. I would like nothing better than see college football never say who the top 25 teams are. Because you know how I know you're top 25? You have one of the 25 best records. That to me is what matters more. If it were up to me, I would basically dissolve the conferences as they are and just say, we're going to have 8 conferences. Everyone sort yourself out. And the 8 conference champions play in the playoffs, and that's that.
I mean, there's too much money involved to do that.
I know.
I get your point in kind of a theoretical level. It's just, it's obviously not going to happen.
You want to win.
So here's the interesting part of this to me. The money. So, by the way, I'm reading a story from CBSSports.com.
Mm-hmm.
This is from a month ago. We just got to this now. But college football expansion issues, including scheduling models, revenue distribution being debated. Dennis Dodd, September 8th. And there was one other column, which, if you give me 1 second, I didn't have it open here. Where is it?
Well, you're looking for
it. But anyway, I can't find it. But anyway, so the point here is that what they claim is this is an estimated annual payday of $1.6 billion for the 12-team field. Which, if you work that out, that comes to like $100 million a game,
right?
And there's a bunch of logistical issues that I think are fascinating to this, which is part of this is that a 12-team field, then you've got at least 3 rounds, maybe 4 rounds. Let's see.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'd be like the old NFL playoffs. You'd have a wild card team or 2 wild card teams. And then you have
quarterfinals, semifinal, finals.
Yeah.
And so part of the problem here is that if you do that, this runs then into the NFL playoffs. And so a big part of this article is talking about how to handle that, because what they don't want, there's no point in creating the system and then have it get slaughtered in the ratings by NFL playoff games. Right. And so they were talking about possibly midweek games so you can avoid the playoffs, because don't forget, the NFL starts playing games on Saturdays toward the end of the season and through the playoffs.
Right.
So that's part of it. And then they had proposed in the column, and the other one that's not in front of me right now, sorry, unknown writer, is to sort of end it on the week before the Super Bowl, on that off week.
Yeah, I've seen basically their whole schedule up is what it's going to end up being, including I was reading one article that said they probably will need to move the regular season starting up a week at least to make this work time-wise, which some people make a really big deal out of that. To me, if you have to tweak your schedule and move it up or back a week, I don't think that's the end of the world for any of these sports. In the big pick, I know there's contracts. Contracts can always be adjusted if they have to. But like you could definitely move, the regular season for college football up a week or 2 if you needed to, just to make this work.
Sure.
The thing that I thought was interesting about this whole situation, Steve, is what this is going to mean for some of the bowl games. Right now, they're talking about the New Year's bowl games are going to be basically part of the playoffs. All of the big bowls would be one round, basically. And then the first round is a bunch of home games played at the schools, which means a lot of money for those schools. That's for sure.
It does.
But are we safe in assuming that if you're not one of those big time college bowls, your bowl's just going to go extinct at this point, in all likelihood?
Yeah, I mean, ESPN is propping up a lot of these bowl games because ESPN owns most of the bowl games. Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have terrible ratings. Nobody goes to them. If you don't we've talked about this on the show before, but how the tickets work is the bowl game will force the participants to buy a certain number of tickets.
Right, the schools, yeah.
And it's sort of like rock bands and clubs. Pay to play. You have to buy tickets from us, and if you sell them, great. If you don't, that's your problem. That's what they tell the schools.
Right.
So if you have to make a name up, like UC Berkeley playing in a bowl game in Atlanta, well then UC Berkeley, that's Cal, would have to convince their students to travel to Atlanta for the Tidy Bowl.
Right.
Which isn't likely. So these schools lose a lot of money on bowl games. and they do it for the prestige of the program. So I think bowl games are an anachronism.
Anyway. Yeah. I mean, I've only ever gone to one bowl game.
Never been to one.
I went. So Temple got to play their first bowl game in like 30 years, and it was at RFK Stadium. I was like, I gotta go to that.
Perfect.
Right?
You had to go to that one, yeah. And I have been to one bowl. I went to a random bowl game in Houston one time. I forgot.
Oh, okay. It wasn't like one of your alma maters, even.
No, it was
just
not.
Random schools.
Yes.
Yeah, and
it was Navy and Texas Tech is who it was.
Oh, okay.
And so I was there basically. My friend who was an Annapolis grad wanted me to go with him. So.
And you can understand that. Like if you're, it's in your town, it's your like.
Yeah, it was a fight. It was a good. I'm always happy to go watch football.
Right. But yeah, a lot of these bowl games, I don't even, what is ours in DC here called? The Eagle Bank Bowl, the like Midakee Car Care Bowl, all those, they could go. I mean, as much as I liked having one in DC, now it's all played in Annapolis, actually. They don't even play it in the city. They moved it because RFK is such a mess, they had to move it to the Annapolis Stadium.
Yeah.
So just get rid of them. That's fine.
We're running out of time here. So, but to finish the thought, what the other interesting part of these columns is they were talking about distributing some of this income to the players. Which, and this comes from NIL. It comes from sort of the move in the past 2 years to allow athletes to make money.
Yeah.
So that's part of this. And it's not a lot. I mean, the numbers that were in here are, 32, okay, they're just making numbers up there. I mean, they use the term, the number $32,000, but that's just notional. So, anyway, so point is, as a part of this thought is apparently a plan to include the players. So we'll see. Now, this isn't going to happen. Apparently, as the earliest it could happen is 2024, but it appears as though it's going to be 2025 to get this done.
Oh, and I saw as late as 26.
Well, yes, that was the original 26, but this article says most likely 2025. So somewhere between 2024 and 2026. And a part of this is a lot of the bowl contracts and stuff expire.
Because they have to wait for the bowl contracts, the TV contracts, all that stuff's got to line up in the end, right? I mean, it's going to be interesting. The way college sports has just been shaking out more and more. Even basketball's getting left behind by football, right? Like it's fair. That's fair to say.
No, it's not, because
you don't think so?
No, March Madness makes 10 figures.
Oh, I'm sure it does, but
March Madness does not outpace. College football does not outpace March Madness.
How many of these? How many of these college football or these college conference realignments have to do with football versus basketball? Do you think?
The major realignments have had to do with football. Yeah. There have been teams that have moved because of basketball.
Oh,
those are mainly predominantly basketball schools that have done that.
Right. Your Georgetowns and those types of schools, yes.
But these conference realignments, like Oklahoma and Texas going to the ACC or SEC, is football for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But I think you're wrong to say it financially outpaces March Madness, because it doesn't. March Madness is the biggest event on the calendar other than the Super Bowl.
I'm not talking about the finances. I'm talking about, I think football's driving a lot of these changes more than basketball from the realignment side. And I think there's going to be the one thing that doesn't make sense to me, Steve, with all that aspect of what's going on in the college sports scene. Why aren't they just, all right, you're in this conference for football, this conference for basketball. Just let them split it all out. Especially
it's about money. It's about finances.
Yeah, but especially for the non-revenue sports, they shouldn't be in these conferences. It doesn't make sense for your track and field team. If you're a California school, you should only be doing track and field against other California schools.
There are a few teams that do that.
Yeah, they all should be at this point, is what I'm thinking.
Not all, but I mean, certainly makes sense for some.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's more to come on this. We will see how the plan shakes out, but we wanted to make you aware of that is happening. So look certainly no earlier than 2025 appears to be the year. But Alex is right. They've threw 2026 out. It's going to be a while. But in one of these columns I had, the one I couldn't find, had interviewed a bunch of random fans and writers and stuff, and some of them hated it, some of them loved it. The hated people say it's going to ruin the majesty of the regular season in college football because, it's not a one game and you're out thing. I think all that is a bunch of crap, personally. I mean, I think it'll make it better. There'll be a playoff system will be more exciting. You give more teams a shot who deserve a shot. So I'm 100% in favor of this.
I think I saw a number that said like 85% support some kind of playoff. It's just, I think that nuts and bolts.
The scope of it.
Yeah. How it works out.
Well, we ran out of time. We had another couple stories, but ran out of time for this because we went on about the Snyder stuff so long. So we will come back to all that another day. I'd like to thank Alex for being a super sub for our African travel colleague. Remember to check out the Hog Side, which is Alex and I's show about the Washington Redskins, Washington football team, Washington Blanks.
And a little bit of NFL stuff as we try to throw that stuff in there more.
Rick Snyder has this Seasons Discontent, which is, we publish that for him on our site, and he's also on YouTube at Snide Remarks.
Snide Remarks, yep.
Yeah. And then check out all of our regular written content. So until next time, we will see you later.
Yep. Later.